Welcome everybody. This is our August Major Gift Scotch Talk, the next installment in our series of informal, sort of happy hour-like Scotch Talks, in which we pick a topic in fundraising and kind of try to digest it. I'm gonna give a few minutes here for folks to join and hop in. In the meantime, I'll just ad-lib a little bit and chat. So we've got a couple different time zones represented today. We've got Jason, who's coming to us out of the Phoenix office, and Ben, who's in the Mountain office, in our Denver office, and I'm in the Mid-Atlantic area, which is broadly that I don't live in a major city. Baltimore, if you must know. So for those of you who don't know, which I think probably most of you do, who are joining us, American Philanthropic is a consultancy and strategic advisory firm for nonprofits. We offer a broad range of services, from personnel to database building and management to development consulting to strategic planning. All of this information is, of course, on our website, where you can read probably more than you ever cared to know about all of those topics, and including at philanthropydaily.com, where we have a lot of helpful articles and tricks. So, okay, I think we'll go ahead and launch into more meaningful introductions of you guys. So I'm attempting to fill Jeremy Beer's shoes here, which is definitely not possible, but I will do my best to be a good moderator. So I'm Cecilia, Diem, managing consultant at American Philanthropic. We are we're based across the country, a couple of different offices that I already mentioned: Denver, Phoenix, Philadelphia. Jason here, who I will start with. Jason Lloyd has been with our firm for, I think, over 5 years? Over 5 years, Jason?
5 years this fall, so not quite, but
yeah. Okay, so he's one of our veterans at this point. Prior to coming to American Philanthropic, he worked as a trainer and curriculum specialist at Americans for Prosperity Foundation, and also worked in the development department at the Goldwater Institute, which is a public policy think tank. He served on the board of Voices for the Voiceless since 2017. He received his BA in American Politics and Policy from Patrick Henry College, which major points to anyone here who has heard of Patrick Henry College, and currently lives in Gilbert, Arizona with his wife and son. I believe are you a third or fourth generation Arizonan, Jason?
I'm third. Clark is fourth.
Clark is fourth. Okay, I know there's a proud heritage there. What you will not learn about Jason from his bio online, and probably the most important thing to tell you here, is that he stacks up more successful development interactions for his clients than almost anyone else in the firm, including a really exciting $25 million grant for one of his clients last year. His wisdom and persistence serve our clients, especially his clients, well over the last 5 years, and we're very excited to have him here with us today. Joining us again is Ben. Okay, so Ben Domingue. Wins the award for the least intuitive last name pronunciation at the firm, I think. So it's Domingue rhymes with meringue, as in I prefer meringue topping on my key lime pie. Right? Am I even doing that right, Ben?
You're doing a great job. Yep. It
Okay.
is a Cajun pronunciation of a Spanish name. So I'm Cajun French and Spanish. So
it's very complicated. He's had to deal with many Domingues in life, I think, including myself the first time. But more importantly than his fascinating name, Ben here is also an expert in major gifts. Before coming to us, he worked as a major gifts officer with the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and as a director of development with ACE scholarships, both Denver-based organizations. He received an MBA from the University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota, with a concentration in Catholic philanthropy. He earned his bachelor's degree in international trade and finance from Louisiana State University, where he played on the SEC championship football team. He lives in Colorado with his wife and children. He is not obviously multi-generational Coloradan.
I am not. I, along with my wife, are immigrants. So I immigrated to Denver from Louisiana, and then my wife immigrated to Denver from Ireland. So she is a first generation immigrant. So
well, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much for being here. Excited to be having this conversation with you. I think we will go ahead and just get rolling. I'm not sure if we're recording this or not, but if we are, let's imagine that we're going to start recording now. So last year when we had this conversation, We spent a lot of time talking about where to find prospects, that particular portion of major gifts. We talked a fair bit about guerrilla prospecting. If you are interested in looking at that video, it's available on our YouTube page. Caitlin can drop the link in the box for everyone. But rather than talk again about prospecting, I want to focus more this year on two things. One, the why of major gifts, and two, the how of the ask. Because both of those things are important. One of them sort of contextually and big picture, and then the other at the very nitty-gritty level of, oh my gosh, should I wear a tie to this donor meeting? So we're gonna kick it off with a few questions, and then we really want to hear from you all. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions, drop them in here. This is very informal. We are indeed drinking. I have a hard kombucha here just to really show my yuppiness. Yeah, we've got some beer, it's got Scotch whiskey going of some sort. So, all right, I'm going to start off by asking both of you the same question, and I want to hear your two takes on it. So, what is the point of launching a major gifts program? Why should we bother? Why bother to do a major gifts program when we can all just go to GoFundMe and throw up a picture and just, crowdsource fundraising? Yeah. What's the value of a major gifts program? I'll start with you, Jason.
Yeah, no, that's a question I've heard frequently, and usually from people who don't like fundraising, leaders of organizations that struggle with just having that talent. And so very, very common question, but I would say good fundraising and transformational fundraising, if you're looking to grow or sustain your organization, comes from relationships. And you want your donors to get brought into the life, mission, and vision of your organization. And so to do that, you need to invest time to spend with them, either yourself or pay someone, a major gifts officer, to spend that time with them, to let them know the work that you're doing. So that's kind of my short answer.
So basically, donors need to feel connected to the vision of the organization. You want to bring them to that life.
If you want transformational gifts, if maybe that's what you don't want. If so, then
you don't want transformational gifts. This is not the webinar for you. Let's just start right there. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's great, Jason. I agree with all of that. Ben, what would you add?
I think that's a great point. I think starting there is that donors, one of the largest reasons people give is because they identify with your mission. That is an extension of who they are. And like Jason said, inviting them to the life, mission, and vision in a deep way is why you should launch a major gifts program, right? Now, the major gifts are a byproduct of that, but in a practical stance, I think GoFundMe relies on these too, right? I've never met a GoFundMe page or any organization who wouldn't want $10,000 or $25,000, right? Like, but to Jason's point, it's because they don't know how or they're scared, right? But on a practical level, I think annual gifts make you sustainable, but major gifts make you scalable. And kind of to think that through, right? In our analysis of organizations who receive $1,000 or more, usually it's about 20% of donors are contributing 80%, 85% of donations raised. Just last week, I was working with an organization who only had 2% of those people giving 30% of the organization's raised, right? So they have an incredible amount of untapped potential with development, and people want to do that, right? So
yeah, that's great. I agree with everything you said. And that's, the 80-20 rule is so important. That's knowing that most of your budget is going to come from just a handful of really committed individuals is so important.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I see we do have a question coming in, which is fantastic. See, how do you recommend organizing major gifts portfolios by region or a tier system? Let's see, Jason, I'd love to hear your take on this, and then let's get Ben's opinion.
Yeah, I would say it kind of depends for me, and Ben, I would love to take opposite opinions of you for some of this, but I think it depends on kind of the nature of the organization. So there's not always a one size fits all approach, but for NGOs, managing a caseload of 100 to 200 is kind of the range that I look at. If you have other responsibilities, less than that. If you are only an MGO purely, then more donors. Regionally, I would say it again depends on your work and depends on if there's other MGOs involved. And it also depends on where your donors are located. Do you have donors in a region? Are you looking for this MGO to stir up new donors in this region? And tier system obvious. Yes, I'm a huge fan of tier systems. Tier systems help reflect priorities in my eyes. I like to look at who's the warmest donors versus who's a cold prospect and kind of tiers in between. And each portfolio should have a decent amount of warm prospects, warm donors, current donors, lapsed donors, but then it should also have some cold donors on there to try to stir up those relationships again and re-engage. So hopefully that answers the question. But
yeah, cold prospects. No, I think that's great. I mean, it is. As you were talking, I realized we should set terms here. So
yes.
when we say major gift, when I say major gift, I mean anyone giving $1,000 or more. If your organization is small, starting up, if you are a local historical society, a major donor for you might be $50. Okay. And that's totally fine. For the purposes of this conversation, we're probably talking about $1,000 or more when we say a major donor.
Yeah.
And then secondly, when we say MGO, we mean a major gifts officer. Just some people call them regional development officers or philanthropy advisors, or you can title pretty much any way you want to do development. So when we say MGO, that's what we mean. The person who has been tasked with raising money from your major donors. That's our shorthand. So
can I speak a word on major gifts? Kind of setting those out. First to tag on to you, Jason, I completely agree. To your question is, it really depends on the nature of the organization, right? The size, the history, the strengths, right? I've seen something as unorthodox as every person in the leadership team taking 30% of their bandwidth to run major gifts, and they have their own pool that they're developing. Now, it was unorthodox, but it worked for them, right? And the stage that they were at. I think that's something to constantly be thinking. If you do end up doing regions, that person should have about 3 territories. That one development officer should have at least 3 territories to oversee. Because chances are the territory that they live in is going to be the territory that they can go deepest in. If you're going to be flying into a region, you're typically only visiting with a creme de la creme or the said philanthropist or people who've been engaged to you well, because they say, hey, I'm busy that Thursday. Well, I'll fly out 2 weeks from now to see you. Busy, right? As opposed to if you're there, hey, I'm here week in, week out, right? And also in terms of not to be verbose here, but in terms of major gifts, I think I agree with you. $1,000 or more is a good framework, and as we think of it, but we should really be thinking that there are 3 types of major gifts. There's what a donor thinks a major gift is, and that could be $100 or that could be $250, right? We would hate to tell anyone that their gift is not a major gift, because it is, right? But at the same time, there's got to be what we're speaking on here is, how does the organization define a major gift? Is it $1,000, $2,500, or $5,000, right? And I think that's important to know, is that, hey, when that's who you need to be closing gifts from as a major gift officer. But then there's a third sphere, and this is important to know for any major gift officers there to manage up, which is there's going to be a level in which the board or the leadership considers a major gift. And the way to define that one is, what level will you close a gift at that the board chair or the CEO is going to call the board chair to say, honey, right? Or to say
that is very interesting board relationship.
For him to call the board chair or him to go home and to share with his wife and say, honey, we closed $100,000 today, right? So it's important to know, because those gifts need to be celebrated, as do the ones beneath you. But it's important for your organization to feel like it's accomplishing its goals, and I think that's important. Those wins are huge in terms of celebrating as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ben, what you're making me realize we could do an entire separate webinar, and perhaps brainstorm. Perhaps we shall someday on things you should know before you accept your first major gift role, including how does your organization define a major gift? This is a question you should ask before you say, yes, I will do major gifts. That is a really, that is a key thing to understand first, first and foremost. Yeah. And thank you for the correction on, yes, the goal of development is for every donor to feel as if their donation was a major gift.
Correct.
That whether or not that is true, or whether or not it is a meaningful percentage, I should say, of their budget, certainly is true. Every donation counts. Absolutely.
And
Jason,
Cecilia, I would say that should be the guiding principle of all organizations who want a good and healthy philanthropic kind of department, is focusing on what are the internal practices and systems in place to help recognize that externally. So as Ben said, a major gift is what the donor thinks is a major gift ultimately, but internally, how are you building that relationship? So.
Yes, excellent. Okay, I would like to just ask you guys a few little questions here. So I did say we weren't going to talk about prospecting, but one of you, someone very intelligent suggested this question. So I do want to ask it. How should you use prospect research? Or said another way, how do you take prospect research and not make a meeting feel creepy? So
I think I often coach, not often coach, if any of the engagements I work on are on this call. I'm not speaking of you, but it's the latter question. How do you take this research, right? This information that either American Philanthropics done, or yourself or someone else has done on the donor, and just not make it creepy to sit in front of them and say, oh, I know you have 3 kids. I know you go to this church. I know that you've been in this industry 4 years and before that. No, that's not the point of this research. That is creepy. The point of that is to help, what I like to guide, one, ask him out. And Ben, I would love your, I've heard you say this before, so ask amounts, like how to determine ask amounts, if we can address that maybe. But that, number one. Number two, funding interest. What do they like to fund? What are they passionate about? And sometimes that comes from the profile. At the very least, it helps put what I call cues, natural cues for you to play into. If you know that you're good at golf, I'm not good at golf, but let's say I was, and then I was meeting with you, and I know from my research that you golf, you have membership at whatever club. I would probably bring up golf as I was golfing, not lying, but being honest. I was golfing the other week at this, whatever the golf term is for the field. This shows my golf.
He's a real golfer. Yeah.
Anyways, the whole point is just picking up cues to make the meeting natural, and so that it's not uncomfortable and very transactional. And hey, I would love for your money for this, but trying to actually be a human. So, anyways, that's how I would say with the research.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I feel like asking questions that allow the donors to reveal, like what you said, allow them to reveal things about themselves and share that meaning. I have had donors say, okay, why the hell are you visiting with me right now? Right. And they know I've seen research. They know that like they called my spade, right?
Yeah.
And I think in times like that, the best way to respond is to lead with praise. Right. And so what I have shared is always, I would say something like, you would have to be living under a rock to not know what you have done for the Archdiocese of Boston, or right. Like, and then, right. And then they get excited and say, oh, so you have heard about what I've done. Right. And you lead with praise. And so I think that is a great way of kind of, especially when they call your bluff, to lead with praise and say, hey, I'm here because you've done some amazing things. Thank you so much for what you've done. Right. So for our movement, for our cause.
Yeah.
I love that, Ben. I love that. And I think the key there is to make sure it's natural, so this is easy if you're doing, this is easier if you're doing kind of faith-based fundraising or something like that. You say, well, I just love how much you've done for our diocese, or let's say it's an art museum, right? Like, hey, I love how much you've done for our community. I saw your name on the wall at the art museum and thought, hey, that seems like someone who's committed to community. So I wanted to come and talk to you about our after-school learning programs that we have here as well.
Now, a word on that.
Yeah.
From experience, if you're going to do that, and you're going to call the wall from the art museum, select the top 3 Do not call all 20. That's when in terms of prospect, you can look at like-minded organizations who do great things, but I would choose 3 because you don't want them at the next board meeting to say, hey, did you guys get a phone call from Jason Lloyd? Oh yeah, I did, right? So I would say select choose 2 or 3 of the top ones to call. So
yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Good important reminder. Yeah. So we've got some questions coming in the chat. I'm going to try and answer. Let's see if I can multitask efficiently. We're not really. I'll try. In Amphil's experience, is it important to differentiate between gifts given related to events, sponsorship, and table purchases versus gifts given in response to a personal solicitation? Short answer, sneak peek, yes. And how do you steward donors who give major gifts without any solicitation at all? These are great questions. This is a 2-part question. So first we've got the event sponsorship versus the major gift, and then we've got the stewarding non-solicited. When a fish jumps in your boat, what do you do to care for that fish? It sounds like what the second half of that question was. So, Jason, lead us off here.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which one I want to tackle first, but let's go with the event sponsorships. Yeah, definitely a different beast. Every once in a while, some donors kind of see it hand in hand, but for the most part, in our experience, we see event sponsorships different. Donors see event sponsorships differently than their major gifts. In many ways, it's above and beyond their actual major giving, and so it should be treated differently. When I was at Goldwater, I did a lot of event fundraising, and before that too, even did some event fundraising. And so I love and hate event fundraising. I think it can be a shiny object in front of organizations to say, hey, we can do this really big gala and get a lot of money. No doubt you can, but it will drain a lot of time, resources, and talent. And so, but we're not here about event fundraising. We're here about major gifts, which is many donors love that socialization though. And so like the mixing with like-minded individuals, being seen, like there's a lot of reasons why donors enjoy those events and will pay big money to go to those events. But it is often seen more often than not as different than their annual kind of in-person solicitation. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question.
And hold on, I'm going to tag in there really quickly. Also, you will see more transactional interactions happening at that sponsorship level. That's where you're going to get your corporate sponsors coming in, your whatever, your your credit card companies. They want you to put their name on their coffee cup, and they do not care if you call them to ask them how their grandma's doing.
They want either public recognition, or they want to bring in their friends. They want to fill the table with 8 seats. And so like it is highly transactional and should be treated as transactional.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love it when major donors come on and you have no clue why or how. And I also love it when donors say, you know what? Just keep me updated. That's all. Send me a letter once a year. Just keep it simple. Those are mission aligned people, and it happens in all sectors. I do think it is important to still steward that relationship. When I say steward, I mean make sure they get those updates. Don't think in your mind, oh, that one email that I send at end of year is going to count for that. Make sure that unless if they say, I will not give if you handwrite a note to me or something, whatever the requirements are, try to personalize that outreach still. So
that's great. Yeah, thank you. Ben, anything to add to that?
I think to Jason's point, I think you need a strategy in terms of getting in front of your donors and asking them why they like to give to your organization. And then have a holistic approach when you're talking about their giving for the year. Because what I see too often with organizations is they scramble to get their table commitment, and they get the table commitment, they forget about it, and they come in and say, oh, how much is he going to give by year end? Why didn't you have that holistic conversation about their overall giving before, right? And you could have asked them for a $15,000 table sponsorship and a $10,000 gift, or overall $25,000 to your organization, right? Yes. And then in terms of stewarding major gifts without any solicitation at all, and kind of tackling on the second question of ways to engage unsolicited major gifts of 10 or 25,000, which if that's your problem, man, You got a great problem to have.
Tell us more about your problems. Give us some of your problems. Please.
Yes. Only 22% of Americans can write, there's a study on, can write a check for $1,000 or more for an unforeseen emergency. A significant less of the population can give $1,000 or more for a discretionary item, more than likely, or charitable giving, right? So they're giving you $1,000 or more unsolicited. Blackbaud did a study that said that those people have a statistically high chance, I think it was like 85 or 90% likelihood they can stroke a check for 10x, right, of that gift. So if they're giving you 10 or 25,000, they're trying to signal to you like, hey, I'm super rich. And I really, and I've had this happen where a donor sent in $10,000 when we asked, why did you send in $10,000? And because she said, because I wanted you on my couch to come talk to me. And I think that's what donors are trying to signify to you is like, hey, I'm a major donor. Come talk to me. Yeah. Develop a relationship. Now, not all, right? But most, I would say there are exceptions, but I think the best way to steward those people is get to know them. So.
No, that's great. And we actually, every other year we put together something called the fundraising performance report, where we survey, 50 to 100. It's definitely over 50. Be good if I knew how many. A number. We survey a number of charitable organizations specifically about their fundraising, and we have seen that overall, if a donor comes in at the $1,000 level, then if stewarded properly, their lifetime donor value jumps up to, I think it's 30,000. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to check on this because I actually don't remember the number offhand. You might think I shouldn't have started telling it since I didn't remember it, but it is an impressive number. And so the stewardship, I'm glad you asked about stewardship because that is an important thing to do. And that really just means building the relationship and through whatever means the donor opens up to you. I would say, I think that's really how to sort of synthesize what you two have both said there. So, okay, thank you. Moving to another conversation. Do you think, this is a great question from Mary, do you think that most donors still like to receive phone calls to thank them for major gifts? I found that the younger donors and even some older don't seem that receptive to thank you calls. So I'm going to jump in with my strong opinion here because I have a very strong opinion, which is you always call to thank, even listen, this is the world of caller ID. Nobody has to answer a phone call that they don't want. So you call and you leave a voicemail telling them that you got the gift and how grateful you are, because no matter how much those donors complain to you about, oh, you don't take the time to call me, blah, 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 you can bet your bottom they are complaining twice as much to their wife that they didn't get any acknowledgement. Like, I sent a $5,000 check and no one called me. This is kind of rude. I wonder if they got it, right? You never, ever, you definitely want them to be annoyed that you called rather than annoyed that you didn't call. But Jason and Ben would love your thoughts now that I've brazenly stated my strong opinion.
Ben, take this one first.
Yeah, so Penelope Burke is kind of the leading thought leader in terms of donor-centered fundraising, in terms of especially donor acknowledgement. And what she has found is that what donors want to know is that in her studies of nonprofits was, did you receive the gift? Are you grateful? And is the gift already hard at work? And so we need to speak to that. And I think another understanding of if people are along the millennials, right? I encourage my clients to say the number. Thank you so much for the $1,500 that you gave to us, because there's a reality that we are working with philanthropists and we're also working with emerging philanthropists who don't know about giving. This is their first time. They're starting to develop that muscle. And so we want to inform them that we're super grateful, right? We don't want to create a culture of lack of philanthropy. We want to create a culture of developing philanthropy, right? And then also, Cecilia, to your point, the 6-year donor value, the average 6-year donor value from someone who's coming in with $1,000 gift or more over the next 6 years will average over 6 years, 125,000.
Boom! So more impressive than the 30,000 that I had in my mind. Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
No worries. So,
look at you being prepared. Love it.
So yeah, but that's my 2 cents. But
yeah. I won't add much other than I think everyone wants to do thank you calls. I don't think I've ever met someone who doesn't want to do thank you calls. It's just time. It's a matter of making the time to do it. And so finding ways to break it up so it's not year end, and making sure it's timely, I think, is the most important part. So just, yeah.
Yeah, I think this definitely falls in the category of doing it imperfectly is better than not doing it, right? And if you are struggling to get thank you calls made, then you've either got the wrong person doing it, or you've got a bad script, or something's not adding up. But it should be done.
This is where tiers are also important. I know, like, in some it does eat me up that, like, many groups can't get through all thank you calls, or even if I was with a group, I couldn't get through all my thank you calls. But that's where tiering it and going, okay, well, what's reasonable today? I can get through my tier 1 thank you calls. It's better to do tier 1 than none at all. And
that's right. That's the tiering system. Yep.
Exactly.
If you're also looking to develop your pool, I would say thank you calls are like the best.
Yes.
I have sourced so many major donors through a simple thank you call, and they get on, they say, oh my gosh, thank you so much, I'm so excited for your call, and you hear their enthusiasm. I said, you know what, would you want to set a time to grab coffee or grab lunch? And they are thrilled to meet. And if you're trying to launch a plain giving circle, I would say that this also fits, that thank you calls can be a large source of playing gifts for your organization. So
yeah. And to the I see someone asking, Ben, the third thing that Ben mentioned, or reference to Penelope Burke, it was did you receive the gift? Are you grateful? And is your gift already hard at work? Is that right? That was
yes,
the third
correct.
thing.
Yeah. How is it being stewarded? Is it being used? Right. So
Exactly. Okay, another question here. What is anonymous attendee? It's exciting. What is the most efficient way to assess lapsed donors for where to put the most energy in renewing them? This is a fun question. And I think this is like an emerging field too. There's actually a lot of predictive modeling that can be done depending on the size of your file, or your house file of donors. But I don't know which of you wants to take this one first. I'm going to give it to Jason first, and then
thank you. And I might circle back after Ben and realize things I forgot to say, but no, this one's hard. This one's a trick. I think if there was an easy answer to this, or if we had a formula that worked perfectly, groups would be way more successful than they are. And so the important thing when looking at lapsed donors is, one, if you have a relationship, it's easier to ask them, why did they lapse? You can kind of be upfront and be like, hey, I noticed you didn't give. I don't want to be like intrusive, but like, what's the reason? And sometimes it's medical bills. Maybe there's a family emergency. Maybe there's things like that. Predictive modeling, I love looking at data points and kind of running through with our data team, or the organization themselves, and looking at key points to kind of see, was the message wrong here? Did we try to pitch specific programs that just are outside the wheelhouse of these sets of donors? So it's Celia, what's the question? What's the true question? Like, how do you tackle lapsed donors?
It's disappeared from my screen, so I don't know where it went.
What's the most efficient way?
What's the most efficient way? I would say not looking at just one set of data, but trying to get two sets of data. What information do you know from having the relationships? So you should be taking notes, and you should be able to pull the notes on all the lapsed donors that are in your portfolio. And then two, look at predictive data and go, should these donors be renewing with me? And kind of look at those hand in hand and see if there's a story. If there's no story, then kind of talking that out. So
yeah. No, I think that's good. I would just add to that, like at a very basic level, literally, I mean, if you're talking about, I have an Excel document and some of the donors in it are lapsed, you sort by gift size, and then secondarily by last gift date, or by last gift date, and then by gift size. And you just start, that's how you prioritize. Where's the most amount of money that we've lost over the last 3 years with this person, not, and then you start working your way through, and then you go and look into those two data sets that Jason mentioned. So I think that's, that's
for mid-range organizations, you should have a pulse of all 1,000+ donors. If you have a major gifts program, you should be able to do what Celia just said and go through and say, I know why this person didn't give. This person didn't give. We've never had interaction with them. So you should be able to do that line by line.
Yeah, that's key. Anything to add to that, Ben?
Yeah, I think we need to look at, when you talk about lapsed donors, right? What do you mean by lapsed? Do you mean 12 plus months, 24 plus,
Good
36?
clarifying question. Yeah, that's a good clarifying question.
Yeah, because
We're gonna figure
because
it
a
out.
lot of times when we talk about lapsed donors, we think, I don't know, there's another study done, I can't remember, it was Penelope Burke. I'm not gonna, I can't remember it, so I can't cite it, so, but it's a study,
But it's
I'm
true.
sure I can find it.
We
true,
wouldn't
someone
lie
did
to
it.
you. It's true.
Yes, it's true. I approve this message. But what they found was that they reached out to all lapsed donors of a number of different organizations and asked them why they were lapsed. And the most common response was, "Oh, I support you guys, don't I?" They didn't even know that they were lapsed, and those were 3-year lapsed donors.
Yep.
So I think the most efficient way, if you're talking about the most efficient way, I would say if you could call them and renew, or if you could, have an intern do this, right? So I would say call them if their wealth screen or their net worth is high enough, and they would fall in a major gift lapse. We think of live bunt, side bunt, but I think you should call and ask for a visit, like Jason said, right?
Yeah, and just note there, Libun, that is shorthand for last year, but not this year giver, and
Unfortunately,
Skybunt is some year, but not this year. It's not a perfect acronym, but that's what he's
But
talking.
last year, but unfortunately not this year.
Oh, okay, you're gonna add an unfortunately.
Yeah. That's it. So, but I think, and then if they're not being responsive, then I think the best way is to mail them, right? I think if you could kind of segment it out and half get the control group response of, hey, would you support, or half get a control mailing of, hey, you might not have known that your gift lapsed, right? But I think the best thing going, to use a word for medicine that my wife uses, because she's a whatever labor and delivery provider, is being prophylactic in this, right? Is that it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is a use for prophylactic. Yep.
Which is this. Hey, this is a Scotch talk, okay?
That's right.
But it is to make sure that you have a second gift strategy.
Yes.
When we think of lapsing donors, we think in terms of they've lapsed in the past 12 months or 24, but most donors lapse actually at month 7. So if they've given a one-time gift and they're not part of your monthly giving club, or they're not renewing on an annual basis, you want to make sure that you have a second gift strategy roughly around 7 months to hopefully build them up pipeline. So
Ben, is that for major donors, or is that for like new donors that might be like less than 5,000, less than 2,000?
yeah, I would say those smaller donors to help build your pipeline. You don't want to lose them, but I would say for major donors, you want to give a phone call or a meeting. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I got a good question here, and this is coming to us from Daniel. Boy, oh boy, if I had an answer to this. Okay, the major donors all want to be with the director of my organization, naturally, who has only so much time. Yes. Any thoughts on how the MGO can help take some of that off the director's plate without alienating major donors?
Yeah.
Do I have thoughts? I have thoughts. Jason, let's hear your thoughts on this. This is, for what it's worth, you're in good company. This is a perennial problem that we see with so many of our clients, right? Dynamic leaders start organizations, build relationships, build up a board, and then those people come to expect, a constant access, and it's hard to transition that. So Jason, let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts, but I was in Denver last week, and Ben actually shared his precise story just like this. So look forward to his comments as well. But I think this is one of the biggest things that I faced when I was in the kind of an MGO role, and I think everyone who is, and I don't blame the donors for thinking that way. If I was a major donor giving that level, any level over 1,000, I would want the attention of the head of the organization. And so the ways I went around it, sometimes you just can't do it. So one, kind of think to yourself, can you convince this person that it's worth their time to meet with you, or can you not? If you can't, just skip it. Not just skip it. Like, there's a different way to address it. But more often than not, acknowledging that with them and saying like, hey, I know you don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time with me. I know you want to have the time and attention of the president. I met with the president on Monday, and he specifically told me, make sure to, when you meet with the president or the ED or whoever, you bring up this donor's name so that you can tell this donor, I brought up your name and they said thank you. If they had time, they would make sure that they were on this flight with me. So kind of like acknowledging that with them, but also pivoting and going into the work that you do. Ultimately, yes, dynamic leaders, they're inspiring, they'll help raise even more money, but back to, I stole the life mission vision from Ben. That's his phrase that he uses. But ultimately, donors want to give to the life mission vision. And so kind of focusing back on the mission and vision is kind of where I lead.
I totally agree. If you can't do it, you can't, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're all human, right? I think this question, Daniel, speaks to the importance of major giving circles or major giving clubs, right? Because back when I was a major gift officer, I was at a high level and we were doing 20 visits a month with travel. So I was doing 240, 250 at minimum donor meetings a year. Of those unique, I would say probably about 200, 220 a year, unique people, right? But I still can't, they had a number of people giving 6-figure gifts, 7-figure gifts who wanted to meet. Well, it was like 7-figure gift, we'd meet with the CEO, president, but with 6-figure gifts who wanted that time with them. And the best way to do that is build in major giving circles where once a year you would launch something where they're invited to an exclusive event, right? And all they need is 3 minutes time with them to say, hey, right, I love what you're doing, right? Because typically these CEOs are very impressive people. These founders are very impressive people. So just giving them that feel, I think major giving circles allow them to feel part of a community, something bigger than them, and still get face time with the CEO or the founder.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I think this is really where Major Donor Club comes to help you. And just for a sense of context, when you're saying like, oh, okay, you know, the president of our organization, can you give us a sense of the budget of this organization you are working at? Because that is not necessarily the threshold that you should hold for your, it really depends on the size of your organization, what level you restrict the, presidential or leadership access to.
Mm-hmm.
So Ben, what was the scope? What was the scope of the organization that you were referencing there? Was that, were you bringing in like 100 million a year and then you restricted the $1 million level, got to meet with the?
I think the size of the giving for the major giving circle depends on the organization, right? I think you want to set a threshold that people are already existing in the circle, right? So you can't set a giving circle if no one's in there, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a circle. But you want to tell those people that they automatically qualify, and typically if they're giving at that high level, they're already getting face time with your director or founder or CEO, right? But it's a great way for them to introduce. Most donors will tell you, I don't want to ask for money. I don't like asking for money. But if you have them host a major giving circle or some kind of dinner, there's nothing more powerful when that one donor looks to the new possible major giving circle donor and says, so you coming into the founder circle next year? Well, heck yeah, he is, right? Because he's getting to spend time with other guys of a great caliber, right? And the CEO, and he's having a great time. So typically most organizations start off with about 10 or 25,000. I've seen them as low as 5,000, but they can go up to about 100,000 in terms of giving circle. So those ranges.
That's great. Okay, got a question here from Brian that I'd like to bring up. We are a startup nonprofit. Excellent. Good for you. We went from 0 donors to a 750K over 3-year commitment. We did the phone call and text updates, which seem to be well received. We are also sending a handwritten note. Awesome. Love that. Are there any other recommended strategies?
Since you're a startup, if you have unique wins within the next few months, something exciting that you either share with your staff, keep it informal, but like forward that along and be like, hey, this is we just passed this mile marker and it's because of your support. And so just kind of thinking of simple ways to engage. Yeah,
I like that. I think in this case, this is really one of those questions that really brings you back to the chicken and egg problem of like, well, what are our organizational goals? How will we know when we've hit our biggest milestones? Have we thought through setting milestones, which is how, there's this constant tension in development about whether or not development is pushing the strategy or if the strategy is pushing development. And it kind of, ideally, I think there actually is some tension between those two things because they together, there should be tension. They should pull each other forward. You don't want it to be 100% one or the other, I think. especially since, you know, your fundraisers, your frontline fundraisers are in many ways your listening arm, right? They know what's going on in the community and with the donor community, but also with the physical communities that they're embedded in. Kind of gets to what Ben was saying about the region that you're in, and you know, where you are local, you will spend the most time, you will have the best relationships. So that's this is not something that we've had an opportunity to bring up yet, but I feel like I can never say it enough. Is you really want to be listening your gifts, right? Jared, this was a big thing that Gerald Panis always talked about. A good donor meeting is a meeting where you do the least amount of talking. And of course, walk away with the biggest possible check. He didn't say that part, but that's the, you know, that's the takeaway. Okay, let's see. Got some more questions lined up here. What are the, Ben, this is one for you, I think, kind of drawing on your years of experience here. What are the best practices for getting face-to-face meetings with donors who are non-responsive or that you've never been able to get in touch with? Can you give an example of what you might say in 30 seconds to a donor you haven't been able to connect with?
Okay, great question, right? Most donors, I'll be as brief as possible, right? First off, if they don't want to meet, they don't want to meet, right? A lot of times I would say, you know, you want to reach out to them to meet them in person and thank them for their support and update them on your mission. But they might say, no, I don't need to meet. I don't need an update. I don't need to thank you. But then what I've encouraged sometimes to the donor major gift officers I work with is to ask them for something. Say, I totally understand. I want to respect your time. At the same time, I'm working on an initiative for our organization that I would love to get time with you. I'd love to get your insight on. And you want to be sincere, right? So I'm not saying make up something or, right? But for the organizations I've worked with, I've encouraged them, whether it be a case for support, they want feedback from a major donor on their case for support that they're currently working through, or a new initiative, programmatic initiative, or that might tap some interest of something they've never heard of before. Or frankly, even saying, we realized we didn't know enough about our donors and why they give and how they make giving decisions. And I would love to ask you for your advice. Right. So I think that's a really great way. And I've had people say, okay, what the heck, I'll meet with you. Right. So I think that's helpful. So
that's good. That's great.
And that's a great relationships for the organization. Right. So
yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. We're coming into our last 10 minutes here. I do want to answer one question that I think is really important that popped up further down. Sorry, but we're not going to get to all the questions. We apologize, but we'll
please email us. We'd love to.
Please do email us. All of our bios are online. You can find our contact info. But someone, Nicole asks, is mass texting kosher with major donors? And my strong feeling is no, but I would be open to hearing Ben and Jason. I'd love to know what you guys think about that one.
Yeah, I would say no too. I've seen it effective a few times, and I'll focus on that just because I think we understand why it wouldn't be effective. Where I've seen it be effective is if the organization is more of an awareness group or trying to share updates on various programs, and more of if donors have gotten accustomed to receiving mass updates, then I think you can kind of keep it as is. But even then, I would want to drill down and do personalized updates, just because that's I mean, like as human beings, when we leave a community or we leave something, we want to know that our absence is missed. And so donors, if they leave, you should recognize them leaving, or at least reach out to them. And so if a donor leaves and no one reaches out, they're going to be kind of like, well, they didn't need my help. And truthfully, you do need their help. So yeah, that was me externally processing that question. I would say no across the board.
Yeah, I think, but Ben, you tell me. I mean, but when I was still in fundraising, and this was, I mean, it's been about 5 years since I've been in face-to-face fundraising. But at that point, I was just getting to the point where I had texting relationships with some donors. You know, what's your read on where we are in that technological? Ugh.
I would say most donors can see fake, right? So I would say, like, I don't think mass text, unless it's a reminder for an invite or way to serve your organization, would do you well, right? I would say more one-on-one text messages is more fine, right? Don't be scared to reach out if you know they have a favorite football team or something fun that you think of them, to reach out and let them know that you're thinking of them. Donors love that, right? So, because why? Because they're human, right? So I think the more you can humanize this process, the better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. I agree. Okay, I think before we wrap up, I do want to hear, I would like to ask I'd like to ask you guys about your horror stories. Like I want to hear a story from the trench, right? Like what's something that went terribly wrong in your fundraising experience and how did you recover, right? Because a lot of fundraising is just grit. You think you might, I think a lot of times people are afraid of taking action because they're afraid of messing it up. And my experience, and I think our collective experience, practical wisdom that we have here at Amville tells us that one, everything that can go wrong has already gone wrong for someone else, and the world has continued turning. And two, it's better to take some action than to take no action. So with that in mind, I'd love to hear, Jason, I'll start with you. Just tell me about this time that something went terribly wrong and how you fixed it and turned the story around, hopefully, or how things failed.
Yeah, the turn the story around. I don't know if I have that, but I'm going to share two, and they'll be very, very brief. One is a misreading of the ask amount, not prepping to understand what ask level was going to be. Actually, the research was done, but it was decided to go higher, and it was too high, where it made the donor feel a little bit it was just awkward. It was like we just didn't do our research, and so that was just a really awkward situation to be in. The donor continued to give, but it's just like you never want to be in that situation. The second one is usually when you make an ask, you be silent right after. This was like when I was very green, right out of college, was sitting when the president made the ask, and the donor got quiet, and it was like a standoff between the donor and the president of who would be the quiet the longest. President gave in and be like, well, if it was $1 million ask over 3 years. And she jumped in and said, well, if $1 million's too much, we can reconsider and maybe start with 250 this year. And the donor said, sure, let's do that. Observing that situation, the donor was very used to this, was kind of seeing who would speak first. And anyways, it's you always be silent until the donor speaks. So
that's right. You have to, this was hard for me when I was fundraising, leaning into the awkward silence, just letting it sit.
It helps if you have food, you can put food in your mouth and start to chew.
Ooh, that's a great tip. Yeah. Bring a granola bar to your meeting, make the ask, and then whip out your power bar. It's like a flex as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll just sit here eating while you make up your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in seriousness, that is if you're at lunch, that's a great opportunity to sort of take a bite, have a sip, see how they let the silence, let the awkwardness happen. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because there are many times I ask and I'm like, man, I'm super nervous, and I'm just, I had one experience where I asked the donor, and he was very significant to the organization and pivotal to our growth. And I got a call that morning on the way there that my colleague who's higher up than I got sick and he couldn't make it. And I have to do the ask myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, and so finally I made the ask and I said, okay, I gotta admit, I'm super nervous, right? And the donor laughed. He said, oh man, you did fine. I said, I hope you know I'm just trying to do my best here. And he said, of course you did, right? And so I think that's understandable, right? Like, especially if you're young in development, right? Like we're nervous, we're human. And I would tell that I would see that with the donors. Like, I have a hard job. I have to ask people for money, right? And you're right, you dang right, I couldn't do what you do, right? So I think on terms of stories, I had one experience, 3 quick things. One, I've had a donor where I cut off from a $75,000 ask from a big fish that we never got in front of again. And sometimes you just lose, and that's fine. That's life, right? And then the other 2 stories I had was I did the exact same thing, and I did the right thing. One donor I asked, I said, I would love the opportunity to ask you for a 6-figure gift for this capital campaign. Would you mind if I did that? And he said yes. And I made the ask. I brought him in, we had the president, we did a slideshow, the whole 9 yards, and it was a great pitch. And I got a phone call 3 weeks later, and I found out in the meantime, he invested with a friend of mine in terms of in his company. And I had at $250,000, and we had asked him for $100,000 over 5. And he told me I was the worst development officer to ever worked for the organization I worked for. And how dare I can't believe you. How did you ever think that was a good idea? And that was incredibly humbling, right? And humiliating.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good word for it. Yeah.
And I did this exact same thing with another couple. And they decided they just given us $250, and I asked for $1,000. And then I was gonna go in for an ask, and they prompted me and they gave me 10,000. And so then I asked and said, would you ask permission to play? Would you come in at 6 figures for this campaign? I want to chat with you through what that would look like, right? And they said yes, and I made the same exact ask. And they came in with 100,000, and they're looking at $250,000 from their estate and leaving us one of the 4 homes that they have. Because in her opinion, she said, well, George, we got all this oil money, right? And so the reason I share those 2 stories is sometimes you mess up, that you're human. And sometimes you do everything right, and it still falls apart. But sometimes it goes really well, right? So I share that because you can do everything right and yet not land the big gift you're hoping for. So
yeah. And Ben is still here. Crucially, he did not, in fact, die of misery.
Yes.
That donor called to tell him that he was the worst fundraiser the organization had ever had. So well done on making it through that. But that sounds coal raking. Yeah. Well, I think I know we're coming up on the end of our hour here. I just want to close with the sentiment that the biggest mistake that you can make in fundraising is not to try. I know I already said that, but I want to keep saying it because it's so, sometimes just taking the first step feels so overwhelming. Perfectionism in fundraising is your worst enemy. 80% of the time, 80% is good enough. And 99% of the time, something is better than nothing, right? And I think that it's so easy to live in the fear of that 1% of the time where your well-intended outreach doesn't hit right, or you accidentally send a letter to a deceased spouse or whatever. There's always something, but that should not stop you from action, because 9 times out of 10, that action is going to be better serve your organization and the important mission that you're trying to advance than inactivity. So thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed a drink, at least, if this was not helpful. And want to quickly invite you all to join us again. We have several events coming up. Forgotten Foundations of Fundraising, a higher education major gifts webinar that will be tomorrow. My colleague John Hanna will speak with fundraising experts from Notre Dame and Stanford about major gifts in higher education. And why fundraising is a meaningful vocation. So please join us for that if you're interested in higher ed. We've also got Jack Fowler slated to be hosting a Givers, Doers, and Thinkers webinar on August 23rd, titled Education Reform: Where are donor dollars most consequential? This is the $1 million question, if you will. Where should you be playing in ed reform? We also have master classes coming up on acquiring, retaining, and upgrading your donors, as well as one on grant writing. You can register for all of these events by going to AmericanPhilanthropic.com and clicking on the events. And if you are not already subscribed to Philanthropy Daily for news about all things philanthropic, please do. You can get a lot more insights from Jason and Ben and all of the wonderful colleagues who make this a great place to work. So thank you all so much for being here with us, and hopefully we'll see you again. And if we did not answer your questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Please email us. We'd be happy to chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much.